And I see we have a number of assembly members on, and the recording has just started. So I now call to order this work session of the Anchorage Assembly on the Mobile Crisis Team. It is Monday, November 22nd, 2021, and we are noticed from 1 to 2 p.m. We'll go ahead and start with the roll. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Chair LaFrance.
Here.
Vice Chair Constant. Ms. Allard. I do see Ms. Allard in the participants, so maybe we'll come back. Mr. Dunbar. Ms. Kennedy.
Here.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Mr. Presberdia.
Here.
Okay, Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Madam Chair, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I do see Mr. Peterson in the participants, but I wasn't able to hear him.
I did hear
Ms.
him.
Quinn Davidson? Okay, thank you.
I apologize, Madam Chair. I don't know if you called my name. It's Jamie.
Thank you, Ms. Allard.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Mr. Rivera?
Present.
Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
Ms. Zolotel?
Here.
Let me come back. I see Mr. Presberdia.
Here. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Presberdia. Madam Chair, that is everyone.
And it looks like Mr. Dunbar is on. Did we get him?
Yes, I'm here, Madam Chair.
Great.
And I am as well, Madam Chair. This is Austin Quinn Davidson.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Quinn Davidson. Okay, so let me point out that the documents for this work session are available online. If you go to muni.org, click on Assembly, and at the top, click on the Assembly Work Sessions link. Scroll down to the November 22nd, 2021 work session documents, and you'll see two for this meeting. The first, Mental Health Trust Authority handout, and the APD MIT review. I want to thank Ms. Zolotel and Mr. Presberdia for organizing this work session, and I know they worked with members of the administration. Thank you all for putting this together. I'm going to hand it over now to Ms. Zolotel and Mr. Presberdia to take it from here and chair the remainder of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair LaFrance. So the meeting today, we really have, to put it in the context after we discussed budget amendments on Friday, two potential options forward with regard to the mobile crisis team that have been presented. The first is the administration's plan to move funds to APD to contract for clinical services. And I believe we're going to hear from APD about that today. And the other is the opportunity to continue with the current format of the mobile crisis team within the fire department at 12 hours while they're 12 hours a day while a request for information goes out so that we can determine if there are private providers who may be able to provide this service in lieu of Anchorage Fire Department and what that might look like. So we're going to just hear a little bit about the plan from APD, as well as move through a variety of like the pros and cons of where mobile crisis could be situated. Mr. Presberdia, before we turn it over to APD, is there anything additional you'd like to add?
No, thank you very much. I think this is the right agenda for us today.
Okay, thank you. Chief McCoy, would you like to go ahead and take it away?
Okay, there we go. Good morning. I was having a little trouble getting it off mute.
We can hear you. You can go ahead.
Okay. Okay, great. So good morning. I'm Chief McCoy, and first of all, I just want to start off by thanking everyone for the work that's been done for our behavioral mental health response here in Anchorage. We all know how important this work is, and again, I'm just really appreciative that it's getting this level of attention and that we're putting forth resources to help those in our community in need. And so I'm just going to start off with a brief overview of where we are at APD. And for decades, we have been responding to mental health crisis here in our community. I've been on the police department 27 years now, and I look back over my career and can recall the many, many circumstances where we've responded to people in crisis. And we've made it a priority here at APD to ensure that our officers receive training in this area. And as the years have gone by, we've specialized more and more, creating opportunities for officers to get specialized training in crisis intervention, all the way to the point where we have our own dedicated unit, the mobile intervention team, that's a co-response unit helping to address these calls within the community. And a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to accompany numerous professionals in the field to Arizona to see their Crisis Now response, community response. And that trip left a real impression on me and helped me truly understand, what capabilities we can bring forth in our community to better serve people who are experiencing behavioral and mental health. And the Crisis Now response consists of three components: a crisis call center, a mobile team that's available 24/7 in the field, and a crisis stabilization center. And after visiting those components in Arizona, there was a commitment made by all the stakeholders that we were going to bring this system to Anchorage. And we've set off on that path. About a year ago, the fire department stood up the mobile crisis team to serve as the mobile team element of that overall response that we're all trying to work and build our way to. And I want to commend the fire department for their efforts in standing up the mobile crisis team and getting those resources available in the community. So as we now discuss potentially transferring that responsibility from the fire department to the police department, I've had to somewhat refocus where our efforts are going to go. But I'm confident that we will be able to continue to deliver the service that's being requested here in the community. And I don't know if my slides are available to be put up on the screen. We sent those, but if my slides could come up, I will go through those.
Jennifer, do you have those handy?
Yes, I can put them up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, great. If we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so as I was discussing, our mobile crisis team has been, or our mobile intervention team and our crisis intervention efforts have been something that we've been doing for quite some time here at APD. All of our officers receive general training in crisis intervention. And then we have a more specialized group that receives 40 hours of training. And then our mobile intervention team are specialists in the field. And currently our mobile intervention team has 4 positions, one position being a clinical manager. We have 2 social service specialists assigned to the unit positions, and we have 1 CIT officer. And additionally, we have crisis negotiators here at APD, highly trained individuals who deal with people in crisis. Next slide. So this slide here illustrates the number of calls we respond to here at the Anchorage Police Department that are related to behavioral health, suicide, and as you can see, in 2019 we were responding to 500 to 600 calls per month, and as you can see in 2020 it skyrocketed to where some months we're over 1,000 calls per month that police officers are responding to address mental health in our community. And it's a combination of our patrol officers who have training, plus some of our specialty groups in mental health responding. And I can tell you, looking at these numbers, there's an incredible need in our community for this service. But when I'm looking at this, I'm also incredibly proud of what the Anchorage Police Department is doing with this level of need and the service that we're able to provide with these types of numbers. So next slide, please. So this is just a further breakdown of the calls that we respond to. So these calls are specifically designated for our CIT officer who's attached to the MIT. Again, the volume of calls we're responding to with just our 1 co-response team is, again, quite incredible, where we're, let's see the total numbers there. So a total of 2,300 calls here over 2020 and 2021. And of that, our MIT and CIT are handling just about 940 of those calls. So next slide, please. And again, this is just a illustration of what our CIT officers doing on a month-to-month basis. Yeah, our MIT. And next slide. And so, as you can see, there's a large volume of calls related to mental and behavioral health here in the community. And what we've been able to do with just 1 co-response team, again, has been quite impressive to deal with this many instances in our community. With resources coming to APD being transferred from the MCT to APD's MIT, we will definitely be able to expand what we're doing. And again, right now we have 1 co-response team. I could very easily see us being able to stand up 2 or 3 co-response teams and utilize the funding that's coming in to contract out with clinicians and other professionals in the field to just further enhance what we're doing here at APD. And again, our goal is to serve as a bridge to get us to where we have the full crisis now response in our community. And in getting us there, I think this is a very important step to continuing to provide service while that's being built. Is there one more slide, or is that the last slide? Okay, budget. Well, let's go back. Good. So, here at APD, we have 600 employees. About 460 of those employees are sworn officers. However, we have a large contingent of non-sworn personnel here at APD who who are serving this community without a gun and badge, and they go out every day and work to make the community better. And we're talking about our community service officers, our data analysts, crime lab technicians, our public relations staff. What I see is with bringing on mental health professionals, APD, those are just additional non-sworn personnel that are capable members of our department that will be able to go out into the community and fulfill this role. And we have the necessary resources to support them where if they do need a CIT officer to respond to assist them in those efforts, we have that capability. And as I mentioned earlier, we have the ability to handle some of the most severe and dangerous cases we may encounter by employing our crisis negotiators and our SWAT team in the most extreme scenarios. So again, we're very confident that if these resources were transferred to APD, we would be able to continue the work that's already being done while enhancing our abilities with mobile crisis and mobile intervention. And next slide. And if Courtney is online, I will let Courtney touch on this budget slide for us.
Courtney is on. She might be on mute. Courtney, are you on mute?
Hi, yes, this is Courtney. This slide just reflects the budget for the integration of the MCT into the MIT. It shows the prior appropriations from the 2021 approved and the 2021 revised budget, and then the movement of the cost for the integration of the MCT into the APD department. And what you can see is it reflects the savings of $825,000.
Okay, thank you, Courtney. So that's all I have to present right now, but I'm happy to take questions. Members of the command staff here with me, as well as members of the MIT.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Weddleton is in the queue. Go ahead, Mr. Weddleton.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate the overview here. So, question I've had is, it seems like we might have some redundancy, and it looks like this, moving this to the police might change some of that. But if you could outline, what is the difference between the core team, mobile intervention team, mobile crisis team, and even the CAP team?
Sure. Tanya or Ruth, do you want to explain the differences of those teams?
I can touch on the mobile intervention team. So that was a project started. Oh, I'm Tanya. Sorry. It was started about 2-3 years ago, I think. And it was to help connect folks in the community to different resources in the community. So if you were experiencing homelessness or mental health crisis or behavioral health crisis, the mobile intervention team could go out, meet you where you are, wherever that might be, and help connect you back to whatever resources in the community you happen to need. And then that kind of morphed about 2 years ago into a co-response model within APD, and that's the CRT. So, which is kind of with a CIT officer, kind of makes that this co-response team. And so that's the mobile intervention team and the co-response team with the CIT. So those are those three. And then I think I see Mike Riley on here, and he might be able to better explain the core team.
And also, Madam Chair, Chief Shaggy is on, and I think he could explain the MCT and the core team as well.
Thank you, Ms. Demboski.
Yes, this is Chief Schrage for the record. Madam Chair, I can speak to the mobile crisis team and the core team. These are distinctly different functions. The mobile crisis team is a 911 response team that actually goes into the field and provides behavioral wellness treatment by licensed clinicians in the field. So what they're doing is responding in lieu of in most cases, in lieu of a EMS or police response, providing mental health treatment in the field, and in the vast majority of those cases, leaving the patient in their residence or in the setting to which we responded. The core team is a bit of a misnomer. It's not really a team. It's a function within the fire department that's entirely separate. And what the core does is they conduct case analysis, identify frequent users of the EMS system, connect with them, provide outreach, and try to provide alternatives to them that keep them out of the 911 system. So between the core function and the MCT, collectively, we're able to reduce EMS and police response to many of these clients.
Thank you, Chief Schrage. Mr. Weddleton, did you have any follow-up?
Well, yeah, that's helpful. On the, I guess it leads to some of the things that we've heard is that moving into the police department means there's a thought that there would be a uniformed officer at all of these calls, and some of the people who are having, mental health issues would not respond well to that. So I guess, would it always be a uniformed officer? And then the mobile crisis team, I guess it has licensed mental health clinicians, I think Chief Schrage said. Would you have essentially the same makeup? Are you moving the actual, would the people employed as the MCT now, would they be moving over to APD? Would it look essentially the same? Thanks.
Chief McCoy, do you want to take that one?
Yes, sure. So thank you for that question through the chair, Mr. Weddleton. So as far as our response, we will have many different tiers of response here at APD. The initial getting our mobile intervention team fully staffed, that team can consist of strictly non-sworn personnel, whether it's clinicians or social service specialists. They will be able to respond and address matters in the field. So there's not a uniformed officer attached to that. If the need arises, we can employ a co-response where a CIT officer that's assigned to that work group can accompany them to address whatever the need is. And then our response can continue to be enhanced from there if necessary for additional officers that are trained in CIT, or if the situation is more dangerous and volatile to where we need crisis negotiators along with the support teams that come with them. We have that full complement of officers and personnel to address those situations. One thing that I've heard throughout is concern over a uniformed officer. Well, the uniform is something that's entirely under our control. If we wanted our CIT officers to be plainclothes and operating in that environment with the social service specialists or the clinicians, we could absolutely do that and have a plainclothes officer who's trained and assigned to be out with those personnel and available to address safety matters that may arise while not being seen or observed as an immediate identifiable police officer. So we have a lot of flexibility, a lot of different resources that we can tier and respond with. And again, having that full complement here, it allows us to be able to adjust and be flexible as the need arises.
Okay, that's good news. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reddleton. Thank you, Chief. I don't have any other members in the queue right now.
Madam Chair, should we move to the next speaker then?
Sure, yes, please go ahead, Ms. Zalatel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have with us Jason Lassard. He is the Executive Director of NAMI, and he's going to present and provide some information and I believe be available for questions. And then after that, we also have Renee Rafferty, who's with Providence, and she can talk a little bit about crisis stabilization centers. While not something we have right now, what role they could play in the system. Mr. Lassard, could you please go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Zaltel. My name is Jason Lassard. I am the Executive Director of NAMI Anchorage. It's the local affiliate of the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Some of my other relevant roles in the community, which speak to sort of my thoughts and perspective on this. I've been for several years a member of the governing body at API. I also chair the Patient Appeals Board at that on that body. I've been trained in CIT. Several years ago, I went through that program as well, and I help with those CIT trainings as an ongoing role in my position here. I'm also a trained mental health first aid trainer, and I have the certification to provide that training to first responders as well. So I've been steeped in this role of how do we respond to these crises in our community, and how do we do it in a way that has best outcomes for those in crisis, and how do we incorporate, when do we incorporate, and when do we not incorporate law enforcement in that role? Thank you, Chief McCoy, for going over very briefly the Crisis Now model. I'm hoping most folks on this call are familiar with it. So I started to get very interested in the mobile crisis team as I learned more about the Crisis Now model. And actually, when I met a very well-respected mobile crisis type team at the CIT International Conference in Seattle several years ago, was the CAHOOTS model out of Eugene, Oregon. They have a different model than what we were looking at here. It's a little more closely associated to what you're seeing up in Fairbanks right now, with a clinician and a peer responder, as opposed to what we've got here right now, which is a clinician or social worker with EMS from or EMT from the fire department. And I saw this team popping it up as a really appropriate use for alcohol tax funds as they were coming up, and a way that we in our community could get a leg up on providing a better response, in one that would incorporate itself into this Crisis Now model, which is onboarding around the state. And so worked closely with Ms. Zalatel and Steph Colston originally on work sessions on the mobile crisis team as we have it now, presented to the assembly and such. And I want to thank everybody for their work. And when I suppose I would say these services are important, and whatever we're doing now, whether we plan to move this team to APD or it stays in AFD for a short time as we discuss, look at some other options, it's really important that we ensure that these services maintain some continuity. So please, whatever we're doing, let's keep that in mind. These are really important for outcomes in our community. So I didn't want it to be just anecdotal from my experience, so I dug into some of the documents that I've been researching from time to time. I would suggest all of you check out, if you haven't already, there is a document released by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They released it in 2020. It's called the National Guidelines for Behavioral Health Crisis Care Best Practice Toolkit. In that toolkit, they go over, a number of the essential components of a well-integrated crisis system of care. A mobile crisis team is one of those three essential components. And they're very clear that among those best practices, one is respond without law enforcement accompaniment unless special circumstances warrant inclusion in order to support true justice system diversion. And they provide all, there's studies with information on outcomes in communities and the effectiveness of these teams, as well as cost effectiveness to the community. So I would really suggest checking out this document. Fantastic piece of work there. But I wanted to bring forward another document, and this one is from CIT International. Remember, this is the sort of the folks that in 1988 started this program in Memphis. They're the international sort of governing body organization for these programs around the globe, and for our model that we have here. And so some of this, it's nice to know that the mobile crisis team may be able to transfer to APD while maintaining non-LEO staff for that, because that is really, really important to these responses. And it's no offense or taking anything away from the work that APD has been doing for 20 plus years on this program. Again, I preach the gospel of CIT wherever I go. I'm a big believer in it, both through my professional career, and I've seen its effects personally within my own family, the importance of having a response like that. However, CIT International this past summer did release a document about why they don't necessarily promote the embedded co-responder model. And so I wanted to read somewhat liberally from this document, share some of these quotes, because it really helps with this perspective. So they say, we agree with the National Guidelines on Behavioral Health Crisis Care Best Practices Toolkit, published in 2020, that says mobile crisis teams should respond to mental health crises without law enforcement accompaniment unless special circumstances warrant inclusion. We recognize that there are situations in which law enforcement and mental health clinicians need to partner on scene to provide an effective response. In fact, we believe that all law enforcement officers should have the option of requesting a mental health co-response when a situation requires that. However, embedding a clinician in a police car means that the response is dictated by law enforcement agency and an officer is always present whether needed or not. Embedding a mental health clinician in police cars increases the presence of police in situations where they might not be needed. Again, we've seen some good with this, but this is best practice. And this is perspective from the group that governs our CIT. And so again, it's nice to know that that might not be the case moving over here. But again, we're bringing the law enforcement perspective into these situations when it's housed under APD. In my perspective, that may cause some issues. Furthermore, they say CIT, and again, props to CIT officers. CIT officers are doing amazing work providing compassionate, respectful, and effective responses to people experiencing mental health crises in communities across the globe. However, the presence of law enforcement in a mental health crisis event implicitly defines the situations as a potentially dangerous and criminal matter. Part of the reason why the CIT model was brought up here was to prevent suicide by cop years ago, right? Again, a law enforcement presence, the optics of that, they all play into this. It's important to note that most people experiencing a mental health crisis are not violent, nor are they engaged in criminal behavior. They report that having police involved is stigmatizing and increases trauma at a time when they feel extremely frightened and vulnerable. And so I'll leave it at that. Now, I would say in response to plainclothes with the CIT officers, I would be all for it. Again, that some of those simple changes that would happen on the scene, where it would put somebody a little bit more at ease, where all of these eyes and attention is not drawn to them, further stigmatizing any trauma of the past. So I just have some concerns that we haven't given this mobile crisis team really much of a chance to get up off the ground, and we're already moving it back into a department that really is not best practice for housing something like this. It's what we've had and what we've worked with for years, and what police departments across the nation have worked with for years, but we're seeing better outcomes by these other models. And so I just question, I question the logic as to why we would move it out of AFD so quickly. I did attend a public safety committee hearing, got great reports from, I think it was Jennifer Pierce, as to the effectiveness of that program. We're seeing great reports out of Fairbanks as well. So I'm not sure I see the reasoning behind this move just yet. I would really, really caution against it without further thought put into this, because there are a lot of organizations that have been working on this for many, many years, and this goes against the best practices that they recommend. I'll leave it at that, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lessard. I don't see any members in the queue right now.
Great. Well, I'll be on the call for the rest of it, and thank you for your time and attention to this, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Alatel?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. It looks like Mr. Weddleton just popped into the queue. If you want to do that first, and then we can turn to our last speakers.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
Yeah, thanks. So for Mr. Lessard, the best practices, is it dependent on where it's housed, or is it the way they look when they show up at an event? I mean, because, the mobile crisis team now, I think, has at least one of the key people was a 6 or 7 year police officer, and then she went back to school for social work and so on. So kind of a neat combination of, skills, I would think. So if they look the same, but they move, and I think somewhat for efficiency to get rid of redundancies and so on, move under APD, is that okay? I mean, it sounds to me like it's more the look and feel when they show up than really who's in charge of organizing the team.
The look and the feel definitely plays into it for sure. I think, and again, it's just a matter of the lens that, or the perspectives that is brought to this, and having, if we can ensure that this is a behavioral health response to a health situation. Again, this is a health situation. This is not necessarily criminal. I'm not going to say that every situation is without that that issue, but this is a health situation. So responding in kind to that with behavioral health and ideally with peer. We're seeing the importance of peers in this, right? Such a big component of the success of the models that we're looking at in Maricopa County is the incorporation of peers. 40% of the staff at the 23-hour call center is peers. So a way to incorporate that. I don't know that I'd be fully opposed to it, but it just seems like maybe a step in the wrong direction. And again, this is not to take away anything from all the great work that is being done at APD, because ultimately I think that by taking this off of APD's plate, it frees them up to do the work that they're here for, right? Ensuring that, again, the difference between an officer that's received 40 hours of training versus somebody that this is their career and this is their, they're constantly going through this type of stuff. It's going to be a very, very different response. And so I just have concerns that we're taking a little bit of a step backwards in the direction that this program is hoping to take us. And if it's a temporary one, with the idea that down the road it's going to offload from APD into something separate from that department and more integrated into Crisis Now, independent of law enforcement, that's great. But I don't necessarily see where that off ramp is being built. And right now we have something that is a little separate and more appropriate from health crisis response in my mind. I hope that clears some things up for you, Mr. Weld.
Yeah, that does. And I really appreciate your perspective on this knowledge. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Thank you, Mr. Lessard. And I don't see anyone in the queue now. So Ms. Alatel, if we want to go to your next speaker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So our next speaker is Renee Rafferty with Providence, and I believe she has a partner joining her from South Central Foundation. The piece to the Crisis Now model I believe they're going to speak about is crisis stabilization and the work they're doing on crisis stabilization in the community. You please go ahead.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak today, and the comments that were made by Jason and APD and AFD are all very important in this space, and the collaboration I think is key Anchorage sits in a situation right now where we are really truly creating a vision of how we could care for our community differently. And the crisis system has been really siloed and ineffective in many ways. And the efforts mentioned earlier by everyone, including the behavioral health providers, to address that are really important. But we've historically done that alone and not as a team. And so this is a really amazing opportunity for us to dream up a vision where our system could work effectively together, and we could look at data and partner between private and public sectors. About 3 years ago, South Central Foundation, the Mental Health Trust, and Providence created a collaboration with the goal of all of us investing in a new crisis system. And now we're at the situation where, we've got a lot of other stakeholders that are investing in this, from police and fire and just many other providers that want to participate in this. And while Providence has participated by building a partnership with the Anchorage Fire Department and helping to serve substance use crises through the Restore Hope grant, and we also have been a role in supporting the development of the mobile crisis team. Those are efforts to really contribute to this larger vision, and we support that. Decisions around how to build this are challenging and they take time. And what the first and foremost comment I'd like to say is that behavioral health experts need to be at the table when we're making these decisions. And so for us to partner with you and with the other teams so that we can really build this system over time, it's challenging. And we see many other cities like San Antonio and Phoenix where they really built a great collaboration and talked about what the best case was. So far, the mobile crisis team development is very early. I think Jason spoke well to that. But just to mention that we really believe wherever the mobile crisis team lands, it's important that we all are at the table having the discussion and create vision and help to improve the process over time. And that at the center of this are our vulnerable community members, and that they get the best care possible. We've been excited to partner with the fire department in building the mobile crisis team. We'll be excited to work closely with APD as well. And the Mental Health Trust and South Central Foundation, all that has been really a blessing to see that we can dream up how to do this differently. We don't right now. Alaska, faces incredible challenges related to mental health being treated within the legal system versus in the system of care, and we'd like to reverse that. So one of my recommendations is that we create a collaboration where we're at the table consistently working on the process improvement, and that when we think about funding that we invest and then we work that process together. Regardless of what happens, I think we need to have stakeholders at the table really informing this, and behavioral health experts will also really make sure that we have that lens in the room. Now we'll pass the baton to Michelle Baker from South Central.
Thank you, Renee. I agree with everything that Renee had said. I don't know if many of you recall, but 3 or 4 years ago, Anchorage was had a behavioral health emergency. So many of our customer owners, what we call them at South Central Foundation, were being seen in the emergency room and in the jails, not only in Anchorage, but across Alaska due to API not being able to see customer owners in a timely manner. And we continually hear from our customer owners that we need a better system to address behavioral health emergencies across the state. And the excitement of the Crisis Now model, that has a call center, a mobile crisis team made up of clinicians and peers responding into the community, meeting their needs wherever they're at, and taking customer owners to crisis stabilization centers that South Central Foundation and Providence are both trying to stand the 23-hour crisis stabilization centers up in the next year and a half in order to meet that community need. And doing that collaboratively, any new project is going to take time. Several years for all of these parts and pieces to work together, and communication and collaboration is going to be key to that success. Renee, is there anything else that you want to add?
I think that was great, Michelle. I think the only thing that I would like to add is that the model where we have a therapist or a clinician, social worker with a peer, I think is really important. And oftentimes that is driven from a provider perspective. You know, most of the time it's a behavioral health provider that is delivering that type of team. But I think one of the challenges is that we don't have a call center set up. And so the partnership with EMS is really important. And like Michelle said, it's going to take us a while to know whether it's effective or not. And there's some good outcomes already coming from the mobile crisis team with the fire department. But regardless, this opportunity for all of the experts to be at the table, you know, and create a regular process for us to check in and make decisions regarding funding and process improvement is very, very important at this early stage of development. If we want to see in a few years that we've really impacted this, I would suggest that we do that on a regular basis.
Thank you, Ms. Rafferty, and thank you, Ms. Baker. Mr. Perez-Verdia is in the queue.
Thank you, and thank you to our speakers. That was really helpful to hear your perspective on this. I see that we're eking up on the end of our time, so I wanted to make sure to say a few things. First, I think that the piece that a few of you have alluded to is this vision for what we know is best practice and what we know we want to move towards. And my understanding is that is a model that is not embedded in APD or AFD, but it is a behavioral health model. And knowing that what was not in place and couldn't be done, then there was decisions to put it at AFD. And so I think that's a key piece to be moving towards, that we all know that that's where we want to go. And we just have to figure out what the path is to be able to get there. And then as the crisis stabilization and all the other pieces of the crisis now model gets put into place. The other piece that I would say is that we do have a current MCT that is in AFD and has staff and has vehicles and has an office and is really beginning to make progress and move forward. So I'm curious why we would move it and essentially rethink it in a new place when it's working where it is. And so the piece I wanted to I guess I also just wanted to repeat what many have said. I don't think this is about choosing between AFD and APD. I think that's a strange dynamic. They're both amazing, and it's really about how to make this program successful and to meet the needs of our community. But I did want to just pull in real quick. I know he's on the phone, Mike Abbott, and just give him a couple of minutes to talk about where we're going here. Like, what is the vision for this, so that we all have a sense of that. So, Mike, if you're on, if you could unmute and just give us a sense from the health trust, from the mental health trust perspective. What's the sort of North Star that we should be heading towards?
Thank you, Assemblyman Perez-Verdia. This is Mike Abbott. Am I coming through okay?
Yep.
Thanks. So I appreciate the chance to talk about this, and I know that the Assembly's Health Committee will be discussing Crisis Now in a little bit more of a holistic manner next week, and we're eager to participate in that conversation as well. And first, I need to say how gratified we are that in Anchorage, a city I've lived in for 45 years and worked in and around the municipality for a long time, I could not be prouder of a conversation that is discussing how we're going to implement a mobile crisis response capability and not whether we're going to do it. That is an amazing accomplishment, and I want to appreciate the work of the administration and the Assembly in getting us to this place. That being said, as you've heard described, the Crisis Now model that Chief McCoy discussed and Jason Lessard discussed, as well as the folks from Providence and South Central, it envisions a mobile crisis response that is not embedded in either a fire department or emergency medicine program or a police or law enforcement program. it envisions a behavioral health response that is aligned with other first responder systems, but is functioning separately and is responding differently than either an emergency medicine or a law enforcement response would be. And I can certainly speak at great length about the characteristics of that, but the outcomes from various models being used around the country are pretty clear that a separate response focused purely on behavioral health is in fact the most successful for the folks experiencing the psychiatric crisis. And it also has the advantage of being less expensive than models that utilize either police or fire personnel. So the outcomes that we want to see, and I'm talking about reduction of emergency room utilization, reduction in correctional utilization, reduction in first responder time, as well as patient outcomes, are all improved using the type of system that we're describing. And as you've heard here, we have been working in Fairbanks to have a system of the sort that I'm talking about, as well as what you heard from others. That was recently launched about a month or so ago with a partnership between two provider agencies, The Bridge, which is a peer-serving organization in Fairbanks, and Alaska Behavioral Health, which is the largest community mental health provider in Fairbanks. They team up between the two of them to provide a clinician and a peer for a 24/7 response capability in Fairbanks. We believe that it is worth investigating, and we're optimistic that the investigation would be successful, investigating whether or not there's a similar opportunity for a contracted function here in Anchorage as well, using municipal resources of the sort that are being discussed, as well as potentially trust resources to get this up and running. Ultimately, to be funded, at least in part, hopefully in large part, by Medicaid and other insurance providing entities, as is the case in similar services being provided in other jurisdictions. So that's my short, 6-minute pitch. Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer more questions. And as I mentioned, we're already planning to participate in Assembly Health Committee conversation on similar topics next week.
Thank you, Mr. Abbott. Do members have any questions? Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure who might want to speak to this, but first let me say that I really appreciate this conversation because I think it helps me put everything into perspective in terms of the different angles that people are coming from. But my question is in regard to actually trying to figure out how you determine what the best response, what the best reaction is going to be to a particular situation. Because it seems to me that when a call comes in, without there really being any background information or specifics about what the call is really about, a dispatch person would have to try to figure out who can best respond in this situation. And I've been told that so many of our situations have involved dangerous situations, or so many of the calls have involved dangerous situations, to the point where obviously the person that the situation is about could be a danger to themselves. They could be a danger to those that are trying to respond and help them, and they could be a danger to the community around them, those that are in close proximity. But you may not really know that until somebody shows up on the scene to just basically investigate what's going on and what kind of help is needed. So even though you could certainly have a situation where you didn't need a police officer, or you didn't need certain kinds of medical attention, but you needed truly just the straightforward mental health types of responses, but you may not know that until you get there. And so I'm really trying to grasp how you respond appropriately at that initial onset of that call with the appropriate resources, because we don't want anyone endangered, particularly those who are trying to respond in a way to help them, to help the person that's that's the reason for the call. So anyway, I just wondered if somebody could speak to how that process really happens when all you've got is a 911 call from somebody in the community that says, hey, I think this person needs help. And then they would really know specifically what to send, who not to send in that initial response. Thanks.
Member Kennedy, this is Cameron Presverdia, and I see Chief McCoy raising his hand, and I also would suggest after he speaks that we're doing that right now at the MCT, and so someone from that group could also speak. But Chief McCoy, do you want to go first?
Sure, thank you. And Member Kennedy, thank you for that question. So this is one of the reasons why I feel confident that we at APD could be successful managing the program. All of the 911 calls come in to APD first, and our dispatch center has to triage and make the decision as to where that call was best served. So currently, we get those calls, we evaluate it, and if there could be a mobile team response, we transfer that call to AFD. If the program was with us, our dispatchers would make that assessment, and then they would make a decision to send either a mobile team from APD that consists of behavioral health professionals and maybe a peer or a counselor. Or if the situation dictates, they may see that it may be more appropriate to send a co-response team consisting of a behavioral health specialist and a CIT officer. Or if there's a more danger associated with the call, then we can elevate the resources to our negotiators and so forth. And having that capability all in-house allows us to scale up or scale down as necessary. If our mobile team shows up and they sense that this is a more dangerous situation than originally reported, they can get on the radio and request the co-response team, or they can request additional resources. And again, I just see this as being so much more efficient, being all housed under one umbrella. And so again, we're transferring those calls now to AFD, and if they assess it differently, then it has to get transferred back, and then we escalate the resources as deemed appropriate. But I think it would be much more efficient if it was all under one umbrella. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I might follow up on that.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, well, I think what Chief McCoy brings up is exactly kind of where I'm thinking in this, is that you almost have to have so much more of a bigger, broader response initially than you think you may have to in the end. And because you just don't exactly know what the risk is to anyone's safety until you get on the scene and then really determine what's going on there. And, so I appreciate that answer, because, it just seems to me that we kind of need everybody. It's like everybody all in at the beginning to make sure that every potential scenario could be dealt with. So, unless somebody else has a different take on that, you know, I'm inclined to feel like we have to be able to make sure that we respond with everything that we need to, just being given the fact that we just really don't know what the potential situation may actually bear out. But anyway, if there's anybody that really wants to respond to that concept, I'd be happy to hear it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I just wanted
Or
to
Madam
mention we're getting close to our time. I do know that it looks like Mr. Lessard has come back on and Chief Schrage has come back on. I just wanted to say that having someone to discuss sort of these models in other places and how they work, I think we would learn a great deal about how that works, and that it becomes really an effective way to determine that over the phone. But Chief, you came on first. I just want to see if there's something you wanted to share, and then I'll hand it over to Mr. Lessard.
Yes, sure. Thank you. Very quickly, thank you for the question, Assemblymember Kennedy, and through the chair. Well, the whole point of the MCT is to avoid having to have a police or EMS response. And so we, the fire department MCT, worked with the police dispatch center to develop the triage tool that's currently in place. And that tool has been quite effective. So looking back on the history of our MCT, which has been in place about 3.5 months, initially part-time, they've had 400 some client contacts. Only 32 of those calls as of the second week of this month involved a police officer on scene. 3 of those were calls that were placed because the MCT requested a law enforcement officer. So that points to the efficacy of the triage tool that's currently in place. I think they're doing a very good job over at Police Dispatch to screen out those calls.
Thank you, Chief. And I did want to note that can we have a motion to extend for 10 minutes?
And we're good just continuing.
Madam Chair, this is Amy. I hate to do this to you, but the chief and I have a meeting at 2 o'clock that we have to go to. So I'm gonna have to steal Chief McCoy.
All right, that's not a problem. I just want to make sure we have a little bit of time for Mr. Lessard and any final questions. Looks like Mr. Constant is in the queue. So I'm gonna sort of unilaterally say we're gonna extend for 10 minutes. Mr. Constant, do you want to speak now or do you want to wait until Mr. Lessard goes?
I just want to briefly say that the idea of a full-blown response with everything we have at the beginning is exactly the nature of the problem that we've been talking about, that the response needs to be tailored to the crisis, not all cannons blaring all at once. And so it's interesting that that frame was put on the table because I think it speaks very well to the issue that we're collectively trying to address.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Lessard, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I just very briefly wanted to towards Ms. Kennedy's question regarding proper dispatching of REISs to these types of crises. I wanted to refer back to the Crisis Now model itself. Right there, I mentioned the 3 essential elements. One of them is the call center, where these calls would go to, and then potentially a mobile crisis team would get dispatched out of there. The model that we're looking at, basing this off of, and with the presentations from the trust, shows that of 100 calls, 90 of those calls can be handled at the call center. So this is part of the program that will be coming on board. The 988 number will play a big part into this, but properly funding these calls means that we might not even have to send a response at all. Whereas formally, those calls would come in and almost automatically get some sort of response. So we're saving resources there already. Then having the proper team respond, of the 10 leftover calls, 7 of those calls can be handled by that team on the scene without any further action needed, without needing to take them to a 23-hour center or something for more acute care. So just wanted to keep in mind that we also need to keep in perspective this larger model that we're trying to incorporate this team into and what's going to be coming down the pipeline there.
Thank you, Jason. And I don't see anyone else in the queue at this point. I just want to send a big thank you to the Anchorage Police Department, the Anchorage Fire Department, and all of our speakers today. Thank you. This was a really great conversation. I think we all learned a lot. I did want to just reinforce that next week we are going to have a presentation from the Trust on the Crisis Now model. And so I hope folks will attend that if you want to learn more about where that model is, what that model is, and how it works, and where we are in terms of its development. I do see a hand raised. It just went down. Okay, great. With that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting with lots of thanks to everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care. This meeting is now adjourned.